Tigers versus Billikens in basketball, a potential matchup that very recently bored me, but now I'm saying bring it on.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And it's easy to forget, but in the 80s, in the 90s, really Norm Stewart honestly saved Missouri sports. I'm going to make that case later in the program. Also, Trent Pierce, to me, with all the offseason news of Missouri basketball, is really flying under the radar. That may not be a bad thing for that young man. And I got to say, God forbid a guy turns off his devices for the night and tries to lead a non-internet-centric life for once. Well, as I was trying to be a normal person for a change, well, there was some pretty big breaking news out there, at least pre-news. Let's put it that way. John Rothstein out there of College Hoops Today says Missouri and St. Louis are working to finalize an agreement to meet in a neutral site basketball game on November 6th at the Enterprise Center in St. Louis. Multiple sources told College Hoops Today. Frank Cusimano of KTRS Radio on his Twitter feed said it looks like the coaches initiated the SLU-Mizzou matchup, 3-year deal, and it will be the first Friday of November at Enterprise. Financial details being worked out. Good quad one game for both schools. Now, it is important to point out here that we're still in the relatively early stages here, and this is not finalized, but maybe early stages is the wrong way to put it. I think we're relatively far down the road here. I would think typically when Rothstein is tweeting something out, it's, well, I'd say about as close to done as you're going to get. We're in the final stages more than the early stages, I would say. And certainly this fits Dennis Gates and his matchup, his ideal matchups, what he wanted to add to the non-conference schedule on a couple of different levels. He was wanting to add possibly another game in St. Louis in addition to the bragging rights game against Illinois, of course, but also just wanting to beef up that non-conference schedule in general. This accomplishes that goal. And I think, excuse me, I think for both schools, this being at least the first game, if Cusimano's correct and this is a 3-year deal, perhaps it'll be all three in the Enterprise Center, or maybe you'll see one at the Billikens home, one in Columbia. I'm not really sure at this point. I'm thinking maybe at this point it's more likely it is just a neutral site basketball game, because that really is beneficial, I would say, to both squads. And I'll just say I was definitely not really that into playing SLU for the most part over the last 5-10 years or so, because, well, to be brutally honest with you, Billiken basketball hasn't been much to write home about. Now, of course, SLU fans will say the same thing about Missouri basketball, but of course, as I'll point out later in the program, once again, Missouri has a much higher standard for excellence historically, is a bigger school. I mean, a million different reasons why Missouri should have higher standards. And as Missouri and Kim Anderson found out, well, if you're going to play an in-state team like UMKC, for example, there better be a good reason to play them, and or you better know that you're going to win the game, because losing it can be a lot of egg on the face. And that was sort of how I felt about it. From my perspective, there really wasn't anything in it for Missouri for all these years to play St. Louis in basketball. But really that's kind of all changed now, as after last season, not only with Josh Schertz and company having an outstanding season, 29-6 overall, 15-3 in the A-10 was SLU last season, but a clear financial commitment is being made to this program. There's something serious happening at SLU right now. So this is an interesting game right now, and one that I think is really a win-win for both programs. That wasn't the case as recently as 2 years ago, I would say. Plus, it's a cheap trip to St. Louis for Missouri. Losing the game is not going to really hurt you. Typically speaking, in these days, the NCAA tournament committee is going to reward teams for playing these types of quad one neutral site games. That's why you see a lot of teams, big time teams like Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, for example, playing these types of games early in the season, whether it's in a Las Vegas tournament or something else. I think this game makes a lot of sense for the Tigers on a bunch of different levels, and really credit to the Billikens, credit to Josh Schertz for getting their program to the point where Missouri is now looking at SLU as a formidable opponent and one that there is something to be gained, number one, and also not something that it's not going to be a huge something to lose either. Now, I do worry a little bit about the Mizzou negative Nancy's coming out in full force if Missouri loses an early game to St. Louis. But again, neutral site, the game is so early. Hopefully most basketball fans are smart enough in Columbia and beyond right now to realize that this is a new SLU program right now. SLU made the second round of the NCAA tournament for the first time in, well, over a decade, and it's only its second appearance in the tournament in that decade. It just seems like things are pointing up for the Billikens, and I think this is a good game. Once again, I just hope we get one or two of these attractive type of non-conference games in Columbia this coming season as well. I will say with all of the off-season activity in basketball, the transfer portal takes up so much oxygen, and of course, well, it's not every year, and in fact, this is the first year ever that Missouri has had multiple McDonald's All-Americans in one cycle with Jason Crow Jr. and Tony Bryant. It sure seems like to me that Trent Pierce is flying wildly under the radar. And of course, he's a somewhat unique player at this point, being a 4-year guy. This will be, of course, his 4th year with the Tigers. Presumably, he's going to have a senior day, right? And I say presumably because there could be a 5th year coming for Trent Pierce as well. I hadn't thought about this until recently because I had been focused on the grandfathered aspect of the 5-year rule. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about here, let me back up for a second. The NCAA has now approved, well, you get 5 years. There's no more red shirts. There's no more 4 years. There's no more 5 years to play 4. Everyone just gets 5 years to play college basketball now. So that means that Trent Pierce and others could play beyond this season. And in fact, this includes other 4-year seniors this upcoming season, like Kennard Davis, who's transferring in from BYU, the Vashon product out of St. Louis. Really only, as far as I can tell, only Luke Northweather and Crawford, the kid we brought in out of South Dakota, will be out of eligibility, as far as I can tell. But again, I think Trent Pierce, I think he's going to have his best season yet at Missouri. I really do. I think had he not had, well, another bit of bad luck last season, of course, his freshman year was cut short by an odd ear infection situation. And then last year, the first part of his season was cut short with injury. It still felt like Pierce had his best season as a Tiger. I expect with hopefully a full off season, hopefully actually a good bit of luck for Trent Pierce for a change. He'll have plenty of time to get ready for this season, and I think he's kind of the perfect secondary scoring option in the half court to Jason Crow Jr. And in a lot of ways, I think Missouri basketball fans who are, let's say, my age or older, who experienced the highs of the Norm Stewart era, are still looking to experience those highs once again. And not only was the Norm Stewart era clearly the best era of Missouri basketball, well, I would argue it could not have come at a more perfect time for the athletic department. I'll make that case here in just a minute. First, though, if you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? Well, you are far from alone. Keeping track of all your spending, your subscriptions, all your bills, well, it can get overwhelming pretty fast, and that's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. And like many of you, not only do I have multiple gigs, I've got multiple emails, just too many multiples, quite honestly. And then I somehow ended up with multiple Disney accounts. Why do I need to pay for something twice that I can only use once at the same time? Well, Rocket Money is who alerted me to this very fact. I put in all my emails into Rocket and they go, ding, a little redundancy here there, genius. Why don't you cancel one of these? Thank you, Rocket Money, a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Get Locked On Mizzou ad-free with, yes, say it with me, the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access. Join at lockedonmizzou.supercast.com. I have to say, there was a graphic put out today by the Next Round that got me thinking. It's too busy of a graphic for your YouTube screen, I would say, but it's a good one to just stare at for a while. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 10s, and the 20s, the last 6 decades, well, it broke down every SEC team's record overall in football by decade. So it gives you just a good giant picture look of all these programs and their ebbs and flows. For instance, well, Florida, other than the 90s and the 2000s, is maybe not quite as good of a program as you would think. Meanwhile, I was reminded that really the 2010s have probably colored my perception of Tennessee a little bit more negatively than it should be, because other than that, the Volunteers have had a heck of a program. I guess there is a reason why they get 100,000 people every single week. But more to the point on Missouri, of course, it starts out here in the 1970s. Missouri 58-56 in those years. Well, Missouri was even better in the 1960s. There is no question about that. But in the 1980s, boy, Missouri really fell off a cliff. 45, 64, and 4 in the 90s. 43, 67, and 3. So about 40-plus games under 500 for those 2 decades were the Missouri Tigers. Fortunately, Gary Pinkel showed up in the 2000s and turned it around. 70-54, then in the 10s, 76-52, and now in the 2020s, which is fully the Eli Drinkwitz era, Missouri 46-29. So what that tells me is in the 80s and the 90s, and for those of you who maybe aren't old enough to remember this, realize this, have put it all together, whatever it might be, well, the 1980s is really when college football and just really, I would say team sports in general, took off to a whole new level, where when cable television came in, now all of a sudden you've got just a monstrous amount of entertainment on your hands compared to what people had before then. I mean, it's just night and day. Basically, if you were a Missouri fan, well, for example, well, actually a great example, in the 1970s, for a year, my dad, who's a diehard Missouri fan, as all of you everydayers know, well, when they moved to Anchorage, Alaska for a year, my dad was jonesing for Missouri football and basketball to a lesser extent for sure, but he was jonesing bad for Missouri football in the fall, because it wasn't as though, just turn on ESPN in Anchorage and you can see the game. No, ESPN didn't even exist in the 1970s. When was ESPN founded? Regardless, the point is, when cable television truly came alive and captured all of America's attention in the 80s and beyond, that changed everything. It changed sports. And my point is, Missouri football, up until that moment, well, it was a pretty doggone good program, but unfortunately, during the big explosion, boy, the Tigers failed to take advantage. Thankfully, Gary Pinkel once again took us out of that. But imagine if Missouri basketball, which was tremendous during the 80s and the 90s, 4 straight Big 8 championships. in the 80s. Lots of memorable teams, the 94 undefeated Big A team. Lots of just tremendous players, great basketball, all that good stuff. It was really, when I was a child, the only reason to be a Missouri fan was because of basketball. Even in a place like Ashland, Missouri, if you wore a piece of Missouri memorabilia during football season, there's a decent chance that your peers would make fun of you because that's how much of a joke Missouri was. I don't really think that's the case anymore these days. Certainly not when the Tigers are winning 11 games in the Cotton Bowl and all that kind of good stuff. That just wasn't reality when I was a child, a young child and a young sports fan, most importantly. So the point here is that Norm Stewart, hey, let's build him another statue for saving Missouri athletics, because just in terms of the brand itself, fans like me in their 40s, 30s, that type of range, there's a lot fewer of us if Missouri basketball isn't what it was. I promise you that right now. And some pretty big news on the Missouri football high school recruiting front, as Landon Williams-Callis, this reported by Power Mizzou and several other outlets, he's a top 50 player in the entire country, according to 24/7 Sports, among others, 34th in the entire country, the number 3 running back in the entire country. And of course, a huge offer list along with the Tigers, as you might expect: Oregon, Texas A&M, and the Texas Longhorns, for example. So obviously some stiff competition there, but I'll tell you this, this is pretty much breaking news to me, so I haven't seen any Williams-Callis tape yet, but I'll tell you this, young man, if you like to run the outside zone, come to Missouri. It's not just people like Cody Schrader anymore. Ahmad Hardy, who is going to be quite possibly, hey, at least before this accident, and I don't expect by the way, let's back up here for a second on Ahmad Hardy. I don't really expect this injury to affect his 2027 NFL draft status a lot. Obviously, it's going to have an effect on his 2026. It's going to be a matter of timing, but it sure seems like, based on everything I've heard, long term, I don't necessarily expect this to be a big deal for Ahmad Hardy. So if indeed, as I was just leading into, hey, if Ahmad Hardy's a first-round NFL draft pick type of talent, well, it's actually possible we may have seen the last of Hardy in a Missouri uniform. He doesn't play in 2026. Maybe he's off to the NFL regardless in 2027. Again, regardless, we as Missouri fans hope to see Ahmad out on the field this fall, and I know Ahmad wants to be out there. There is no doubt about that. So again, to back up here on Landon Callis-Williams, I think you're just seeing a whole bunch of different levels of running backs that have been highly successful in this Missouri run scheme. If you can run the outside zone in high school, if that's what you're familiar with, come to the Tigers and learn how to do it at yet another even higher level, and we'll probably send you off to the NFL. That would be my advice. And I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised by how much I've enjoyed Nick Saban the last couple of seasons on ESPN. His football commentary, I think, is incredibly insightful. It's helpful that Nick is retired and he's just letting it fly. But I got to say, his off-the-field takes, I disagree with them quite a bit. And so let's get into more of my disagreement with Nick Saban, as one-sided as it might be, coming up on the other side of this quick break. Nick Saban's general conceit about the modern state of college football, at least one of his angles, is that money needs to be spread around more evenly to give more teams a chance to win the whole thing, essentially. But is that really how it works, though? Because I would argue that, if anything, more so than a salary cap, I would argue that a draft is what really gives the little guy, if you will, whether it's your small market teams, as it were. I think that's what gives those types of franchises and organizations and markets more of a chance. But really, if that's what it takes, regardless of what it takes, whether it's a salary cap, a draft, or both, if I'm a player, whether I'm at the upper echelon, if I'm one of the top quarterbacks, for example, who's getting paid, or maybe I'm more in the middle class of transfers who's still getting a significant chunk of change, why would I accept either one of those outcomes if it means less money in my pocket? It seems to me that only the players at the bottom of the rung would actually be good with that, would actually be financial, would actually benefit financially. But then if it's only the players at the bottom who are benefiting, well, then what do the players at the top actually do? I think there's a million different sort of down the line ramifications and ideas here that Nick Saban just hasn't put enough thought into, to be completely honest with you. On the football field, it's not good enough to just say, hey, we're going to run up and run this play. You have to think about what the defense is going to do as well. And sometimes the defense is going to line up in a way that you didn't expect. Well, that's when you need to audible and change the play. Nick Saban would agree with that. And that's exactly what some of the top players from high school, from college, who potentially, well, would stick around in college and make money in this new NIL environment. I just don't understand why they're going to accept this. If I'm the UFL, for example, as soon as college sports, if they've hypothetically made a real move for a salary cap, for example, well, then I'm going to try to become the equivalent of the NBA G League. And I might even move my spring football operation to the fall and actually compete a little bit with, maybe not even compete with college football per se, but at the very least, you're going to be the NFL's G League. You're going to be of value to the NFL now at this point. And by the way, college guys who are not even that consequential are making very consequential amounts of money right now. You think you're going to take that away from them without a fight? I don't think that's going to happen whatsoever. And, just as an example, Front Office Sports News reported that Alabama's GM, Courtney Morgan, said that some of the best teams are probably spending more than $40 million to build a championship roster in the NIL era. So where do you set that salary cap? Do you set it at, if you set it at $50 million, then obviously it doesn't change anything. If you set it at 40, well, then it only affects the top 5 to 10 teams. And if you set it at 30, well, now you're just asking for everybody to cheat even further than they already are, to go beyond the rules much further than they already are. I just think that if we're already in a world where name, image, and likeness, well, it's already against the rules to use it as a recruiting tool. Clearly, that's completely out the window. So just the idea that we're going to be able to police any of this, I think even that alone is unrealistic. It's one thing when you have 32 NFL teams, you've got, 130 FBS teams scattered all across the country with different commissioners, and the toothless NCAA is supposed to be in charge of all this. Good luck, I would say. And maybe someday you will have NFL light if indeed the SEC and the Big Ten spin itself off, as so many have predicted now for years. I got to tell you, if that happens, the first thing I do if I'm among the FBS teams that gets left out, the group of 5, what's left of the Pac-12, etc., go form your own thing and make it different than what college football is becoming. In fact, I would copy the BCS, embrace the bowls, embrace what was old. What was old can be new again. At the very least, even if you don't like that idea, at the very least, do something different. You can't just do the same thing and do your own version of a 24-team playoff. That's never going to work, in my opinion. But as always, would love to hear your all's opinions as well. Hit me up on social media everywhere at Locked On Mizzou, or just leave a comment here on YouTube. And until next time, I am John Miller. I'll see you on Monday with your Friends and Neighbors review right here on Locked On Mizzou.